Good evening, everyone. We often think that hate is something expressed loudly through words or actions, but sometimes it can be quieter, more insidious, festering in the spaces we don't notice until it becomes a barrier between us and others. Insecurity in its many forms is one of the most common and pervasive reasons why people harbor negative feelings toward others, even when they may not fully understand or recognize it themselves. It's a feeling that can manifest in various ways, whether through jealousy, resentment, or even passive-aggressive behavior. When someone feels insecure, they perceive themselves as lacking in some way, whether it's in terms of their appearance, abilities, or social standing. This internal discomfort often results in negative feelings toward others who, consciously or not, remind them of what they feel they are missing. In many ways, insecurity operates as a mirror, reflecting back to a person their own perceived inadequacies. For instance, when someone sees you succeeding or living authentically, they may interpret your success or confidence as a reminder of their own struggles or self-doubt. Rather than celebrating your achievements, they may view them as a direct comparison to their own fears of failure or fear of being less than enough. Whether you're lost in a disaster period or fear of being less than enough, this comparison breeds jealousy, bitterness, and resentment because it makes them feel smaller, as if they are falling short in the eyes of others and more damagingly in their own eyes. And so we better have more visionary leaders, right? Insecurities are also deeply tied to the fear of rejection or judgment. People who harbor insecurities are often hypersensitive to how others perceive them. So when they see you confidently navigating the world, it can feel threatening because it exposes a part of them they are trying to suppress. They fear that their own shortcomings will be noticed or that their vulnerabilities will be laid bare. This fear of exposure often translates into covert feelings of hate, as they struggle to reconcile their self-perception with the image of someone who seems to have it all together. Moreover, insecurity often arises from a sense of scarcity, feeling that there's only so much success, love, or opportunity to go around. When someone with deep-seated insecurity sees you thriving, it can trigger a belief that there's less left for them. They may subconsciously feel that your success diminishes their own chances for success or fulfillment. This scarcity mindset fuels negative feelings because it pits them against you in an imagined competition for limited resources, whether that's professional opportunities, recognition, or affection. The insidious nature of insecurity is that it often hides behind more socially acceptable emotions like frustration, defensiveness, or irritation. People who feel insecure about their own abilities or worth may outwardly criticize or belittle you, not because they dislike you, but because they are trying to manage their internal sense of inadequacy. The harsh words or passive-aggressive behavior they direct towards you are often projections of their own fears, doubts, and perceived flaws. In this way, insecurity doesn't just manifest in overt actions, it can also affect the way people perceive your intentions. When someone is deeply insecure, they may interpret even the most innocent or neutral behaviors as threats to their fragile sense of self. For instance, if you express happiness or confidence, they might misinterpret it as arrogance or superiority rather than seeing it for what it is, simply your authentic self. This distorted perception arises because they are unable to separate their internal struggle from the way they view the outside world. Authenticity is a term we often hear, and it's one that we are encouraged to embrace in our personal lives, our careers, and even in our relationships. But the truth about authenticity is that while it is undeniably powerful, it is also deeply disruptive especially to those who are not ready to embrace their own truths. Being authentic means showing up as your true self, unmasked and unapologetic, with all of your imperfections, fears, dreams, and vulnerabilities laid bare. It's a powerful act of self-acceptance that sends a message to the world that you are no longer willing to hide parts of yourself to fit in or meet the expectations of others. In a world that often values conformity, where fitting in is seen as a way to avoid judgment, authenticity stands out as a bold act of rebellion. But here's where the disruption comes in. Authenticity challenges the status quo. It shakes the foundations of how others expect you to behave, think, and interact. When you choose to live authentically, you aren't merely changing your own life. You're challenging the lives of those around you. You're forcing others to confront their own masks, their own pretensions, and sometimes even their own self-deceptions. Think about it for a moment. When you fully embrace who you are, when you speak your truth, pursue what makes you passionate, and reject the pressure to conform, others often experience this as a threat. This is especially true for those who are not comfortable with their own authenticity. To them, your confidence in being real is a stark reminder of their own fear of vulnerability, their own desire to hide behind carefully constructed facades. So the question is, how much of what remains in your heart and your thinking and your words is reflected of your surroundings and your beliefs? For those who haven't yet come to terms with their own imperfections, your authenticity can be jarring. It's like holding up a mirror to someone who hasn't fully looked at their own reflection. It's easier for some people to criticize or resent you than to take a hard look at the parts of themselves they are ashamed of or trying to suppress. You make them uncomfortable because you are shining a light on what they are unwilling to face in themselves. Rather than feeling inspired by your authenticity, they might feel judged or exposed, even though this is not your intention at all. Additionally, authenticity disrupts the structures that others depend on to maintain their control over social dynamics. For example, many people derive their sense of power from being able to manipulate perceptions, whether through social media, professional image management, or personal relationships. They often control the narrative of who they are based on what others expect or need from them. When you show up authentically, you make it difficult for them to uphold that control. Your refusal to play into the expected roles and stories makes them question the validity of the roles they have been playing. It disrupts their carefully constructed narratives, and in doing so, it makes them feel exposed and vulnerable. Moreover, authenticity can create a ripple effect in the dynamics of your relationships. It can push others to either align with their own truths or shrink back into the comfort of their masks. The real beauty of authenticity lies not just in how it empowers you, but in how it encourages others to live more genuinely as well. However, that encouragement can be difficult to accept for those who are not ready to let go of their defenses. They may resist it or even retaliate, perceiving your truth as a threat to the stability they've worked so hard to create. This can lead to misunderstanding, rejection, or even hostility as they are confronted with their own inner turmoil that they have been unwilling to face. But for all the disruption it causes, authenticity is also a source of immense power. It allows you to move through the world unencumbered by the weight of pretending. It frees you from the chains of self-doubt, fear of judgment, and the need for external validation. When you live authentically, you begin to attract people, opportunities, and circumstances that align with your true self, rather than trying to force yourself into situations or relationships that don't serve you. This creates space for growth, for deeper connections, and for a more profound sense of fulfillment. Authenticity also grants you the courage to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, and to learn without the paralyzing fear of looking imperfect. People who live authentically become trailblazers because they show others that it's not only okay to be real, but it's also the most powerful way to live. When others see you taking ownership of your authenticity, it encourages them to do the same. You become a catalyst for transformation, not just in your own life, but in the lives of others as well. Boundaries are often seen as something necessary for healthy relationships, but many people fail to realize just how crucial they are in protecting us from manipulation. A boundary, in its simplest form, is a limit or guideline that defines what is acceptable and what is not in our interactions with others. It is a way of communicating to the world, this is where I begin, and this is where you end. Boundaries are not walls, they are more like fences with gates, designed to ensure that we protect our emotional, mental, and physical well-being while still allowing for connection and communication. One of the most vital functions of boundaries is their ability to protect us from manipulation. Manipulation occurs when someone tries to control, influence, or shape our thoughts, feelings, or behaviors for their own gain, often without regard for our well-being. It can come in many forms: guilt tripping, playing the victim, gaslighting, emotional blackmail, and even subtle forms of control, such as passive-aggressive behavior. Manipulators thrive on the absence of boundaries because it gives them space to maneuver and take advantage of our vulnerabilities. So the codependent, or the person who when we fail to set clear boundaries, we essentially allow others to treat us in ways that do not align with our values or needs. This opens the door for people to overstep, encroach on our time, energy, and emotions, and ultimately manipulate us into fulfilling their needs at the expense of our own. Without boundaries, we can fall prey to people who may use our kindness, our willingness to help, or our desire for connection to exploit us. Imagine this scenario. A friend or family member consistently asks for your help with a project, only to continually take advantage of your time and resources without reciprocating. Over time, the requests become more demanding, and you begin to feel drained, unappreciated, and resentful. If you don't establish a boundary to say no, or if you do but feel guilty for doing so, this person is able to manipulate you into providing them with more than you are willing or able to give. Without a clear boundary, you become a source of supply for their needs, and their expectations will only escalate. Manipulators can be incredibly skilled at convincing us to abandon our boundaries. They may use guilt, sympathy, or even love as tools to make us feel obligated to comply. I need you, you're the only one I can turn to, or if you really cared about me, you'd help me, are all common phrases designed to pull at your emotions and undermine your ability to say no. They prey on our desire to be liked, accepted, or loved, and they exploit our fear of disappointing others or causing conflict. This is where boundaries come into play as a powerful shield. When you establish firm, non-negotiable boundaries, you communicate that your time, energy, and emotions are valuable and not to be taken for granted. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They are about teaching others how to respect you. They help you prioritize your own needs and protect your personal space from being invaded by others who may take advantage of your good nature. But without boundaries, the manipulator has free rein to shape your life in ways that benefit them. They will continue to push your limits until you have nothing left to give. But when you have clearly defined boundaries, You teach others how to treat you. You send the message that you are not an open resource for exploitation and you are not available to meet others' needs at the cost of your own well-being. By standing firm in your boundaries, you deny manipulators the control they seek and you regain control over your own life. Another important aspect of boundaries is that they help you maintain a sense of self. Manipulators often try to get us to doubt our own perceptions, needs, or desires, a tactic known as gaslighting. They might convince you that your boundaries are unreasonable, that you're being selfish, or that your feelings don't matter. This is a classic manipulation technique designed to make you question yourself and abandon your personal limits. With strong boundaries, however, you can maintain clarity about what is acceptable and what isn't. Even in the face of these tactics, boundaries help you stay grounded in your sense of self-worth and integrity. Boundaries also empower you to say no without guilt or fear. Saying no is often one of the hardest things for people to do, especially when there's a fear of disappointing others or causing conflict. Manipulators exploit this difficulty by pushing you to say yes when you mean no. They rely on your inability to assert yourself to maintain control over your life. But by practicing healthy boundaries, you learn to say no in a way that is respectful and assertive without feeling guilty or selfish. Saying no is not an act of aggression, it's an act of self-respect and self-care. It is a powerful tool that stops manipulation in its tracks. And it's beyond the art of self-care. It's beyond the grace to give others. It is the grace to self-give oneself. Another important consideration is that boundaries protect your emotional energy. We all have a finite amount of emotional resources to give, and manipulators are often relentless in taking from us without giving anything back. This emotional drain can lead to burnout, anxiety, resentment, and even depression. Establishing boundaries prevents this depletion by ensuring that you reserve your emotional energy for those relationships and activities that are healthy, reciprocal, and nourishing. You stop pouring into a bottomless cup, and instead you reserve your energy for people and endeavors that align with your values and needs. Moreover, boundaries are not just about protecting ourselves from others. They are about protecting the relationship itself. When we allow manipulation to go unchecked, it erodes trust, respect, and communication. Healthy boundaries create the foundation for mutual respect and understanding. They help preserve the integrity of relationships by ensuring that both parties are treated fairly and equitably. Boundaries foster an environment where both people can thrive, where needs are acknowledged, and where emotional safety is prioritized. Ultimately, boundaries are an expression of self-love. They reflect your understanding that you are worthy of respect, care, and consideration, and that your needs matter. They are a way of honoring yourself and ensuring that you are not sacrificing your well-being for the sake of others' comfort or desires. When you set and enforce boundaries, you reclaim your power, protect your emotional health, and build relationships that are grounded in mutual respect rather than manipulation. Vulnerability is often viewed as a weakness, a soft spot that leaves us exposed to harm or rejection. In our society, where strength is typically equated with emotional toughness, it is no surprise that many people shy away from vulnerability. Fear is a major part of this hesitation. The fear of being seen for who we truly are, the fear of showing our imperfections, our insecurities, and our wounds can create a barrier that keeps us from embracing vulnerability in its fullest form. Yet despite the fear, vulnerability is actually one of the most courageous things we can offer to the world and to ourselves. It is through vulnerability that we experience the greatest connections, the deepest growth, and the most authentic sense of belonging. At its core, vulnerability is about being open to the possibility of hurt, disappointment, or rejection. It means allowing ourselves to be seen in a way that is unfiltered, without the walls or facades we often build around ourselves to protect our hearts and minds. When we are vulnerable, we are letting go of control, and that can be deeply frightening. It means giving others the power to potentially hurt us, to judge us, or to abandon us. And it's this fear of emotional pain that often drives people to avoid being vulnerable, keeping their emotions and true selves hidden away. But why is vulnerability so frightening? What exactly do we fear when we open ourselves up? The answer lies in our deepest human needs and desires. We all want to be accepted, loved, and valued for who we truly are. The fear of vulnerability stems from the belief that if others truly see us, if they see our flaws, our mistakes, our fears, they will no longer accept us. We fear that we will be judged, criticized, or worse, rejected. The idea that we might be abandoned because of our imperfections is a fear rooted in our primal need for connection and belonging. We are social creatures, and throughout history, exclusion from the group was a matter of survival. So the stakes feel high when we expose ourselves to others emotionally. Fear also plays a huge role in shaping our reluctance to be vulnerable. It's not just the fear of rejection or abandonment that holds us back. It's the fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough, and the fear of being perceived as weak or inadequate. When we open ourselves to vulnerability, we are often forced to confront these deep-seated fears head-on. For example, when we share our dreams, hopes, and aspirations, we might fear that they will be dismissed or ridiculed. When we express our emotions, we may worry that others will see us as overly sensitive or dramatic. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in relationships, we are putting ourselves at risk of getting hurt, being misunderstood, or even losing the connection altogether. However, it is crucial to understand that this fear is not an indication that vulnerability is something to avoid, but rather an indication of its power. Fear often arises when we are on the brink of something transformative. It signals that we are stepping out of our comfort zone, moving toward growth and facing the unknown. Vulnerability can feel like a threat to the ego, which seeks to protect us from perceived harm. Yet, it is precisely through this fear that we find the courage to be truly authentic and to form deeper, more meaningful connections with others. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open up the possibility for genuine intimacy, true connection. Whether in friendships, romantic relationships, or even professional environments, requires vulnerability. It is through sharing our authentic selves with others that we invite them to do the same. When we show up as we are, without pretense or masks, we create space for others to be authentic as well. This reciprocal vulnerability fosters trust, empathy, and understanding. By embracing vulnerability, we give others permission to do the same. And in doing so, we create relationships that are grounded in authenticity rather than in surface-level interactions or false facades. Vulnerability also plays a crucial role in personal growth. When we are vulnerable, we are not only allowing others to see us more clearly, but we are also confronting parts of ourselves that we may have been hiding or avoiding. It is in our moments of vulnerability that we are most likely to learn something important about ourselves. Our fears, our desires, our strengths, and our weaknesses. Facing our vulnerabilities head on allows us to heal old wounds, let go of limiting beliefs, and develop a deeper sense of self-acceptance. For example, when we open up about our struggles or our past traumas, we not only invite others to support us, but we also give ourselves the opportunity to process and integrate those experiences. We may fear that others will judge us for our past mistakes or pain, but in reality, sharing our vulnerabilities can be a powerful act of self-compassion. It allows us to acknowledge the full range of our human experience, including the parts of ourselves that we might wish to hide or deny. However, embracing vulnerability doesn't mean exposing ourselves recklessly to everyone around us. Vulnerability requires discernment and self-awareness. Not everyone is deserving of our trust, and not every situation is appropriate for full emotional exposure. Vulnerability is about showing up as your true self, but also about setting boundaries that protect you from exploitation or harm. It's about sharing your truth with those who can hold it with respect and compassion, and allowing yourself to be supported by those who value you for who you are rather than for what you can provide. Fear of vulnerability can also arise from the societal messages we receive. From a young age, many of us are taught to suppress emotions, to toughen up, or to hide our true feelings in order to appear strong and in control. We may fear being labeled as weak or sensitive if we show too much vulnerability, particularly in cultures that prioritize independence, toughness, and self-reliance. These societal norms can create an inner conflict where our authentic selves long to express our feelings, but we suppress them out of fear of judgment or rejection. Yet vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. It takes courage to be vulnerable because it requires us to expose our innermost selves, to take emotional risks, and to face the possibility of discomfort or pain. But in that courage, we find connection, healing, and the opportunity to be truly seen. It is through vulnerability that we begin to dismantle the walls we've built around ourselves and allow others to enter into our lives in a meaningful way. It is only through vulnerability that we can experience a depth of love, trust, and intimacy that makes life truly rich. In closing, we have explored how vulnerability, boundaries, and authenticity are interwoven with the human experience, and how fear and insecurity often challenge our ability to embrace them fully. We've seen how the absence of boundaries leaves us open to manipulation, and how vulnerability, despite its inherent fears, is the key to deep, meaningful connections and growth. While fear may push us to retreat, the courage to live authentically and vulnerably allows us to break free from the masks we wear and the limitations we place on ourselves. Remember, the road to personal growth and fulfilling relationships requires us to face these uncomfortable truths. Vulnerability doesn't make us weak, it makes us real. Boundaries don't isolate us, they protect our well-being and foster respect. Authenticity isn't disruptive, it's transformative. These are not merely abstract concepts, they are tools for reclaiming our power, for fostering connections that are grounded in mutual respect, and for building lives that align with our true lives. So embrace vulnerability even in the face of fear. Set boundaries that honor your needs, and don't be afraid to let your authenticity shine. In doing so, you will not only protect yourself from manipulation and harm, but you will also create space for the kind of life and relationships you truly deserve. Ones rooted in truth, respect, and a deep shared humanity. The strength to live authentically and vulnerably is already within you. All it takes is the courage to embrace it, even when fear tries to hold you back.